Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our television and webcast viewers. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Viewers, we're very pleased that you're joining us today. For 120 years, the Canadian Club has been proud to provide a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their ideas with us and to challenge our thinking. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic business, political, and public figures from across Canada and around the world. Today, we're proud to be kicking off our Global Leaders Series, an event series throughout 2017 that features some of Canada's corporate leaders on the global stage. As you know, the Club's mandate is not to be political or social advocates, but it is clearly to advocate for Canada. At a time when the world is becoming increasingly inwardly focused, this series celebrates our business leaders who are taking bold steps at home and beyond our borders to create prosperity and opportunity here at home in Canada. Like our guest speaker today, Chris Huskilson from Emera. Before I formally introduce Chris, here's a snapshot of some of our upcoming events. Next Wednesday, February the 15th, we welcome the President and CEO of Hydro-Québec, Éric Martel, in partnership with Le Club Canadien de Toronto. And on Thursday, February the 16th, the President and CEO of CIBC, Victor Dodig, will be at our podium. To order tickets for these events or to learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I want to express special thanks to our sponsors today, EY, represented by Eric Rawlinson, Oslers, represented by John McFarland, and Scotiabank, represented by Dieter Jentsch. Thank you for your generous support. I also want to recognize the youth and young leaders who are with us today from the Schulich School of Business and Rotman School of Management and Rotman Women in Management, sponsored by Emera and Blair Franklin Capital Partners. Welcome and thank you for joining us. And now today's speaker. These are uncertain times in the energy sector. Oil and gas prices fluctuate daily. Electricity prices are shocking for many, particularly for us in Ontario. Should we have pipelines or not? We know that Canada's energy sector is a critical part of our economy. We are one of the world's largest energy producers, and Canadians are also big energy consumers. However, we're becoming increasingly responsive to the impact of our consumption. Efforts are being made to lessen our carbon footprint and to consider new energy sources. The federal government is taking dramatic steps to mandate a reshaping of the energy industry. The focus, a low-carbon economy. Today's guest speaker, Chris Huskilson, has worked in the energy sector for almost 40 years, so he's seen lots of change over his career. An engineer by training, and we won't hold that against you, Chris, began his career with Nova Scotia Power in 1980. He became Chief Operating Officer of Emera and Nova Scotia Power in 2003 before becoming President and CEO of Emera in 2004. From modest roots as the Crown-owned electricity utility in Nova Scotia, Emera today is a diversified international energy services company headquartered in Halifax, with over $28 billion in assets and revenues in excess of $6.3 billion, including the $10+ billion US acquisition of American-based TECO Energy in 2016. In fact, 74%, I think, of your assets are now outside Canada. Chris has been actively engaged in all aspects of the energy sector. He's past chair of the Greater Halifax Partnership, the Energy Council of Canada, and the Canadian Electricity Association. At the conclusion of Chris's remarks, he'll be happy to take any questions, so please fill out the Q&A cards, which are on your tables, and one of our staff will collect them. So, Chris, welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Well, thank you, Fred, and thank you all for coming, and special thanks to all the sponsors who all just happen to be partners of ours, so I guess that's a good thing. This is a very interesting time in the evolution of energy, and when we look at how the industry is evolving, and Fred mentioned a number of those things, the most important thing through our eyes is to make sure that Canada continues to maintain that energy capability and energy competitiveness that it's had through its history. That's been a very important part of how we've grown this country, and it's been something that we need to continue to invest in and really be focused on. So that's one of those things that we really need to put forward. The second thing I'd say is that electricity is going to play a tremendous role in all of that. And whether you believe it or not today, what you're going to find is that electricity is going to be more and more dominant in the solution for energy as we look at more and more clean energy. Because today electricity is the only source that we have, the only medium that we have to actually deliver clean energy that is well developed. And so, as Fred said, just a little bit about Emera. We're a $28 billion asset company today, serving 2.5 million customers with over 7,000 employees. And that is about 10 times the size that we were just 10 or 12 years ago. And so it is a big change. Geographically, we actually stretch with investments all the way as far north as Labrador, as far south as Barbados, and as far west as New Mexico. And that really comes from 9 different electric utilities, 2 local distribution gas companies, 2 investments in pipelines, and a couple thousand megawatts of independent power sprinkled around the Northeast, and a marketing and trading business. So it's a pretty diverse and broad geography that we serve and customer base. And if you look across that geography, we see different policies on the energy front across that geography, and that's a great thing for our company. If you look back in time, our company actually, the roots of the company actually go back to the 1840s. And that far back, we were delivering coal gas to streetlights in Halifax. And that was the very first thing that a predecessor of our company did. And so we've been through, we're essentially an institution that's been through the energy evolution that's occurred over this past 150 plus years. And it certainly is, as I said, an exciting time in the industry because it's going actually in large part back to its roots. Back then, electricity and energy in general was very local. Whether you heated your home with wood or with coal, or whether you used candles, or whether you actually used some of those local fuels that existed to you, it was a very local business. And coal was a very big part of it at the time. Canada actually did a really good job of developing hydro resources. In fact, what you see on the picture right there is a resource that was built in the 1920s and still operates today. And that's a story that exists right across Canada. And in fact, Canada, which is probably a little bit unknown to most people, but Canada already produces 80% of its energy from non-emitting resources in the electricity side. And a lot of that is to do with our hydro resources. And so that's been a very important, clean part of the energy sector for a long time. And, if we look at what a smart home looked like back then, it was all about taking your coal gas and your candles out and actually using electricity. And that's part of what we're returning to as well. Electricity was cleaner, it was more convenient, and actually began to become more of a source of energy. In the 20th century and right up until the 1970s, we got to be very global in our energy sources. And that was primarily based on oil. Oil is a global commodity, and until 1973, when the OPEC oil crisis occurred, it was the dominant source of energy for everything. And in fact, you couldn't avoid using oil because it was such a low-cost product. After that time, though, we moved back to coal and more hydro development. And for us, that actually, and as Fred said earlier, that actually set the seeds of privatization. And in fact, in 1992, Emera was privatized. And that, at the time, was the largest IPO in Canada at $800 million. Again, probably something that's little known. But that set the stage for the development of the organization and our ability to follow and work through the energy infrastructure as we do today. Our strategy, going back as far as 2005, really has been about affordable clean energy for customers. And it is producing and delivering that affordable clean energy that has really been the story of success for our business. And as we looked at investments across the various geographies, it was always about finding places where we could invest to create more clean, affordable energy. Whether we did that by investing in renewables or in transmission systems or in gas generation, those were the sources that actually allowed us to make electricity cleaner for our customers. And that resulted in some good outcomes for us, for our shareholders. We've seen double-digit total shareholder returns over that period, in fact, going back 10 years. And that evolution has actually been to demonstrate a significant amount of change in the emissions that we have as an organization. So back as recent as 2005, we were producing about 74% of our energy from heavy carbons. And today, that's now down to about 37% of our energy coming from heavy carbons. And if you fast forward just to 2020, we'll have the ability to get closer to 50% clean and reducing that natural gas. So natural gas we see as a transition fuel, and it's a fuel that will eventually be taken over by more clean sources. Every geography where we do business and all the different geographies in North America actually have a different challenge, have different policy outcomes and different opportunities. In the case of Eastern Canada and Eastern North America, we actually see we're really blessed with a tremendous opportunity and proximity to some very, very large hydro resources. Whether you talk about hydro resources that exist in Labrador or hydro resources that exist in Quebec, and I'm sure Eric Martel will talk about that when he's here. But those resources are tremendous opportunities for Canada to become cleaner and in a very efficient manner. The project that you see on the screen right now is called the Lower Churchill and Maritime Link Project. And that will connect using state-of-the-art DC technology, hydro resources in the far north, and bring them into markets in the Maritimes and ultimately into markets in northeastern the United States. And so this kind of technology is the opportunity that's there to continue to have electricity become more and more a dominant part of how we clean up the situation. So when you think about the Northeast, think about access to hydro, access to wind resources, and access to gas. And those are the things that we'll see happening in that market. And in fact, the opportunity for Canada is to become much more dominant in supply of clean energy into the United States. Clean energy resources exist in Canada that don't exist elsewhere. And so that resource will be a very important resource. And as we think about creating competitiveness in Canada, having more and more clean energy exports will lower the cost of clean energy for Canadians as well. And as well, I think it also facilitates exports of more higher carbon products into this market as well. It certainly is an offset to that. So we're working on a project right now that would go after the Maritime Link project that would see Maritime Canada directly connected to New England and being able to deliver substantial amounts of clean energy into this market. And so that's a great opportunity for Canada and one that we're really excited about. And so when these kinds of projects get done, we'll actually see an interconnected loop all the way around Eastern North America, connecting Newfoundland and Labrador to the North American system for the first time, and allowing energy to travel all across this region, and that energy can be cleaner and cleaner at very affordable costs for customers. Another thing that we're working on, if we kind of change pages for a moment, another thing that we're working on is emerging opportunities. And in fact, ocean energy is a tremendous opportunity for Canada. And we're working in the Bay of Fundy, which is the body of water that exists between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, to produce some of the first streamflow tidal energy in the world. In fact, later this year, once we get the second machine in the water, we'll actually have the first grid-connected array of tidal units in the world. And so I've got a little video I'm going to show you about that. Part of that video was that machine actually heading for the bottom of the Minas Basin and is now producing electricity and has been doing that since November. The zip drives that are on your table actually have a copy of that video if you'd like to show it to your kids. It is an exciting time, and that is an ocean energy resource that we can develop right here in Canada, and one that we can develop the capability of actually doing more for the world in this type of resource. And so we actually are very proud of the fact that this particular project, 75% of this project was actually built in Nova Scotia with Nova Scotia talent and Nova Scotia companies. And that, to us, actually shows the potential that we can do with an industry like this and an opportunity like this. If we go into our southern parts of our system, solar is a much bigger part of the solution. Now, in the north, it's wind and hydro, because that's what's available to us, and that's a low-cost solution. In the south, it's solar. Florida calls itself the Sunshine State, and so producing energy from solar is a very important part of their future. And in fact, in that market, solar energy is now economic. We can install solar farms in that market and in Barbados, as an example, and lower the cost of electricity. And in fact, the Barbados project, which you see on the lower right-hand side of the screen, we've been able to have a cash-on-cash payback for that project for the customer base of 4 years. So they're no longer burning oil for that portion of their energy. and that project is paying customers back in 4 years. So as we start to think about, so how does this all affect how we're going to evolve and how we're going to deliver on Canada's approach to clean energy? It really is by integrating all these things. And what's going to be very important to actually this future is electrification. And that's going to predominantly move to the transportation side sooner rather than later. And so if I flip to the next slide, this is what a smart home now will look like. As opposed to the hot plate, we actually have very efficient appliances. We have a very efficient vehicle. If I actually drive an electric vehicle, and when I drive back and forth to my home, which is actually about a 30-kilometer one-way trip, it cost me $1.10 to fuel that electric vehicle, and it would certainly cost 5 or 6 times that if it was being fueled by oil. And so this integration across the electric system of all these different products and capabilities, highly efficient heat pumps, 1 kilowatt into a heat pump can produce 3 kilowatts of heat. All those kinds of efficiencies that are coming in this system will mean that electricity can be a huge part of the solution for the future. And my final slide is one that talks about Barbados. And Barbados is one of those places that we believe can be a showcase for the world in how the evolution of energy occurs and how we actually move from a less sustainable to a more sustainable future. So today, Barbados relies on global oil supplies in order to produce its electricity. But we've put together a strategy with the Barbados government that would see 100% clean energy production in Barbados by the time we hit 2045. And in fact, we think we can do it sooner than that. Already, Barbados has one of the largest penetrations of solar in the world, at about 25% of the peak energy, or the peak capacity coming from solar on a daily basis. And we've started to install large solar projects there. We've also started to install wind projects on that island. But the key to making this work is actually integrating the electric vehicle into the electric system. Today, there are 110,000 vehicles on that island, and about 2,000 electric vehicles, but we expect to be able to move that along at quite a rapid pace. By the time we hit 2025, we'd expect to have 20,000 electric vehicles on the road in that market. And as we integrate the storage that exists in those electric vehicles together with the solar projects, we'll actually begin to see a clean opportunity, and in fact, it will be a lower cost structure for that market. So we see that as a global showcase. We've partnered with the University of New Brunswick to do a lot of the intellectual property work. We're partnering with other manufacturers and battery producers, and we're creating a global showcase that will actually be done with Canadian talent. And so again, if in Canada we continue to invest, we look forward, we focus on those things that we can do and the transition, then we can do that in a very cost-effective manner. And so with that, I'll turn things back over to Fred and be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Chris. And I have received some questions, and I'd remind everybody, if you do have any questions, please write them on the Q&A cards, and we'd be happy to field them for you. So the first question is, how do you balance, you talked a lot about the low carbon options. Mm-hmm. How do you balance that against cost?
Well, so I mean, I think that is the critical question on the table, and that's why I like to talk about the 3 different regions where we do business, because the answer to that question is different in each region. If we talk about the Northeast, it is access to the large sources of hydro that exist, and using new technologies to actually deliver that to customers in a cost-effective manner. And so the project that we're doing with Nalcor Energy to bring a new clean hydro into Nova Scotia and beyond is an affordable project, is a project that actually has been able to stabilize the cost of electricity in that market. And Nova Scotia will be able to be 70% clean with that project on stream. And so that's what happens in that market. If you go into the Caribbean or into Florida, you'd see that it would be a different solution. It'll be more gas, and it'll be more solar, and those are economic projects which also reduce emissions as we sit today. And so it is a different answer for each one, but it all takes investment, it all takes intellectual property, it all takes a fair bit of concentrated effort to actually come to those right solutions.
Okay, thank you. So this is a sort of a related question. Recently in Ontario, we've stopped generating coal-powered electricity. Will Emera also eliminate the use of coal despite its history in the East?
Yeah, we certainly, I mean, that's exactly what we're working towards. And if you saw the pie charts that I showed, we've already made a substantial change in the amount of coal that we actually use. And the hydro projects from the north and also the integration of more and more electric appliances, et cetera, all those things will help us reduce that coal dependence. It will take some time to completely eliminate it, but you have to go back and remember that the Canadian electricity system is already 80% non-emitting. And so from a Canadian perspective, that actually puts us in a leadership position from a global perspective of already being in a very good place. And so to the point of your original question, or your first question, we need to do it cautiously and carefully. And so we will retain some of those assets for as long as possible to make sure that we don't put additional costs to our customers, but we'll also produce more and more clean energy over time. And as I said, that one project that we've done will let us be 70% clean just by that one project.
So this is an interesting question. I would invite the Schulich students to get your questions in here, because this says, what advice would you offer an upcoming Rotman MBA seeking to build a career, long-term career in the energy sector?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I think the energy sector is a great place. I don't know where the Rotman, there we are, over there. So the energy sector is a great place to build a long-term career. I'm certainly an example of that. Fred talked about 40 years. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but it's getting there. But I really think that focusing on what's happening in technology and focusing on the things that really attract you and allow you to really engage and make a difference. I think those are the things that I think will make you successful if you go into a career. But certainly the energy sector, the clean energy sector, is one that is a great place to work. And there's always Emera.
So I think that's saying Chris would like to get your resumes later. Congratulations on Emera's top ranking in the Globe and Mail board games, top 10 organizations. What is the secret of great governance and the key function of the board today? And I guess I'd add my own question there, the interaction between the board and management to make it work.
Yeah. Well, so my chair is sitting at the table here, so you're probably making her head swell a little bit. But well, I mean, I think first and foremost, having a great board is an important part of that, and we're blessed with great directors that work together in a very collegial way to actually create a great board, and that's something that doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design, and so that's a very important thing. Making sure that when you're recruiting compatible directors and people that clearly add to the value of the business. So that's foundational. But beyond that, it's then creating a great relationship, I think, between management and the board. And that's certainly something that our board and our management team both embrace. And I think that actually turns into great momentum when it comes to governance. And so, the relationship is very strong, and we're very pleased with the way our board works with us.
Okay, great, thank you. So, need three hands. I have two questions here which are very, very similar. Do you think President Trump will change things for you? And the other question is, how has your view changed about U.S. investment as a result of the recent U.S. election?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess first of all, I think that we get that question a lot these days, so it's not a new question. But one thing that you probably need to recognize about certainly about the utility business is it's very much the policies that drive the utility business are very much state-based. And so it really is more important a question as to what's going to happen in Massachusetts, what's going to happen in Maine, what's going to happen in Florida, and what's going to happen in New Mexico. And what we see happening in those states is a steady drive towards more clean energy over time. And a state like Florida, as an example, is it's very dedicated to not putting social cost in electricity, but they're now starting to embrace solar because solar now works. And so those kinds of disciplines are important, and we see that in many of those states. The only other thing that I would say is that when we think about how energy evolves, there's a tremendous customer pull. And the customers in the state of Florida, the customers in Nova Scotia, the customers in the state of Maine, they want to see the change happen. They want to see clean energy available to them. They want more control. They want more choice. And all of those things come from this evolution that we're talking about. This evolution allows for those changes to take place. And you'll be controlling your house from your smartphone, and you'll invest as much as you want or as little as you want. And that's the choice that will make a difference for you.
So still a good place to invest in new business.
Still a great place to invest.
Okay. What's the potential scalability of the Cape Shore tidal turbine project on the world scene?
Yeah, well, I think that's still that's an unknown. It's impossible to answer that question at this moment. Although there are tremendous numbers of sites around the world that could provide energy from ocean sources like streamflow tidal. So if we can, so the project that you see, I would call pre-commercial. It's not quite a commercial project yet, but it is moving in the right direction. There would be tens of thousands of megawatts, which equates to, let's say, the scale of Ontario, that could be produced from existing sources. And so it is a material opportunity, but we do need to get down the road. We do need to get it from pre-commercial to commercial. And I think it's a great opportunity for at least Eastern Canada, if not Canada, to be on the forefront of that IP production and to be able to sell to the world.
Okay, so I've just been given the finger by our executive director, but it was this finger,
okay, well,
which means we have one more question.
Okay.
And if I didn't get to your questions, my apologies. And I have two that have similar themes, and they are really. Can you comment on how batteries fit, and is there a place for nuclear? So in other words, I would say the other options outside solar, gas, and hydro.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just start with nuclear. The challenge for nuclear, especially in Canada today, is that there is no licensed technology available in Canada today to put in place. And so there are existing facilities, and those existing facilities can be refurbished, but there's no new technology that's been licensed. And so there has to be a new technology licensed. I think it will play a role at some point, but it's sometime down the road. And so we need to be able to do something in the meantime. And what was the second one?
Batteries.
Batteries. So batteries are critically important to the intermittent energy. And that's why we see electric vehicles, when they work, and in a place like Barbados, the current technology works, 26 miles long and 14 miles wide, the current technology works, and they can provide the storage. So they are the battery. And so when you can have a dual use of something like that, now you're economic. And so that's how we see it unfolding. Over time, we will see the cost of batteries decline to the point where everyone will have one in their home. That's going to happen at some point sooner rather than later. But in the short term, the electric vehicle, we believe, is the source of that storage.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. I want to ask John Medland, Director of the Canadian Club, to formally thank and close.
Chris. Thank you. On behalf of the Canadian Club, Chris, thank you very much for coming today and sharing your thoughts on the energy sector and outlining some of the challenges and excitement that you have ahead, and we all have ahead. Emera is certainly doing things right. They're innovating. They are taking something that Canada is very good at out to the world stage, and I think we really need to do more of that as Canadians. As our airline sponsor says, the world needs more Canada, and Emera is doing a great job with that. So thank you very much for being here today, and please accept our best wishes for Emera as you continue to take on North America and the world. Just in closing, I want to say one more thank you to our sponsors today, Scotia, EY, and Osler. Thank you very much for supporting today's session. The Global Leaders Series, which today was part of, will continue through the rest of 2017. So I hope you'll be able to join us for more in this series. You can find all the information on the Canadian Club website. We'd like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VBC for live streaming today's event. Thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day.